One problem with doing these third rail upgrades is sometimes you don't have a whole lot of overhead clearance on these tender trucks. You can see the mount that it sits on. This thing only stands proud about 3 millimeters high. So any kind of roller that you're going to add to the truck, you're going to want the mount and the electrical connection to be pretty low profile. So I found these on Amazon. It's a laptop repair kit, and as you can see, it's M2.5 fasteners with a real thin, like, wafer head, and in various lengths, and perfect. All right, so you can see I gouged out the coal piles on these tenders here, and I've got the homemade TMCC antenna almost ready to go. So you can see it's gonna live right in here after I cover it up with some nice heat shrink. So there's the antenna all snug in its heat shrink blanket, and basically what I'll do now is just rebuild a coal pile over it, and you'll never know. Okay, while these two sit here and dry, I will go and get started on the 6184's tender frame. Here's my drill pattern for my second speaker. This is on the 6184 tender, so I actually decided to center it up real nice, and just screwed a 2.5 millimeter screw through there. Just drilled and tapped the hole in the center, just so I could have, so this thing doesn't run away on me when I drill out the pattern. Okay, so here's my homemade speaker cutout, and it looks all right. It's pretty close to the original, and there's the dual baby fat boy enclosure, and I used some of my new 2.5 millimeter hardware and my new 2.5 millimeter taps to mount the enclosure. So, and I also have here the low profile anti-rotate roller assembly, which I hope will be successful. One of the challenges with these third rail trucks is the fact that they leave a lot of lateral slop in the wheel sets. So sometimes you can get crossed up on switches, mostly when backing through. And this particular roller I'm using on both of these are just, they're kind of narrow. I put like a street sweeper on that 5011 class, and I wish I had more of those. Those things were like 3/4 of an inch wide, and they didn't have any trouble. That didn't have any trouble going through anything. It's just that when this gets crossed up due to my old way of mounting it, you know, using modified original hardware, and the slop in these third rail trucks, you can get a little hung up sometimes. So here's the progress so far in the 6184. Again, a little bit of chaos here on the workbench, but I'm still kind of experimenting with some different things too. So one of the things I wanted to do is make some reliable chuff magnet retainers, I guess, for the tender wheel. Like I explained in the first video, I'm just going to stick with using the 2 magnets on the tender wheel and a reed switch here. And but I thought, well, why not at least try to retain the magnets and use some machine-based spacing on them so they're always square. And these will fit on here just like this. And these are kind of rough prints, nothing special, but they'll fit on there like that. And that's it. So these are the magnets that were on the 6131 there. And oh, I just lost them. And as you can see, I have no problem with sticking to a wheel. And I must have never glued these, because they were just on there all this time and they never got loose. They certainly picked up enough metal filings and stuff. So one of the ideas I had initially when I got the 3D printer, one of the things I wanted to try was a kind of a radial magnet retainer to go around an axle. And the idea is that you would embed 4 magnets into it and then use a reed switch to pick up the magnets, much like you do with the tender wheel setup here. And initially I wanted to use it in a locomotive, but I also thought, you know, if I only populated it with 2 magnets, I could use it in a tender. So I thought it might work for places where it might be impractical to mount the magnets on the back of a wheel, you know, circumferentially. So you could have these radial magnets spinning, and like I said, you know, you could position a reed switch in the right position and pick up the chuff like that. So I don't know, we'll see. Maybe I'll do this in the 6184 just for the heck of it, to see if see how it works. It's a very rough print. It was like one of the first things that came out of my printer, and I was so stoked to see it like coming to fruition, you know. And someday I'll try it in a locomotive. I'll probably have to play with the outside diameter of it, and then obviously this one, for some reason I made these with a 4mm axle in mind. And no locomotives have 4mm axles that I know of, at least not my third rail stuff. So someday I'll get to try it in a locomotive, but right now I might just try it here on the tender axle and see how it goes. Anyway, I thought it would be nice to show you my chuff department. So you probably hear me go on and on about these reed switches and magnets and stuff like that. Well, you know, here's like a 7mm reed switch. It's a glass encapsulated magnetic switch that to this day I still can't believe they work as good as they do, considering like you know you're kind of gluing them. And you know, here's a spare one I had. Here's like I think these are like 19mm ones or whatever. And then here's some plastic encapsulated ones. I just used one on my Decapod to pick up magnets on the driver wheel. And I've been going on eBay and Amazon and buying magnets of different sizes. I got these 1mm thick ones, and these are good for the back of a driver where there's like very close clearances. And you know, when you're setting these things up, you got to keep in mind that there's axle play laterally, and that you want to set the reed switch, you know, in a place where it can survive. I also find that pointing these reed switches kind of at almost like axially at the magnet works better than trying to lay it across. Sometimes you can trigger like a double chuff that way. So if you're ever struggling with that, a lot of times the placement ends up looking like this. And and here's some classic Lionel chuff switches, cherry switches, whatever you want to call them. So the Rail Sounds 4 just works with contact closure, basically. Okay, so here are the 2 Q2 tenders laid out. We've got the 6131 here and the 6184. And like I said, I was able to use the 6131 as a test bed for the new components I wanted to try out. You know, the 3D printed base for the Rail Sounds 4 assembly, the baby Fat Boy speaker enclosure, some of the other 3D parts, and the wiring, you know, with a cleaned up little terminal under there. So I was able to use that as a fresh install on the 6184, and they're pretty much identical. So, and you saw the experimentation I was doing with those magnets for the chuff. Turned out it was very successful, so I'll show you here in a minute. So this was a couple of experiments into one. First of all, I wanted to see if my radial magnet retainer was a worthwhile effort, you know, and like I said, this was the first thing I tried printing on a 3D printer. The second thing I wanted to prove about it was that a reed switch, properly placed, could pick up 4 magnets spinning on an axle, say like in a locomotive, because this would give you the wrong chuff rate, pretty much almost double on this setup. But I wanted to just prove that I could pick up these 4 magnets spaced this close together in a radial configuration like this, like that you'd almost want to try in a locomotive. So I've got a candidate in mind for that here pretty soon. But anyway, let's power these up and I'll kind of show you how they work. So here's the 6184's tender with the experimental radial magnet holder. And again, it's going to give out the wrong chuff rate. Basically, as the tender rolls along, the exhaust will sound like the engine's going twice as fast. But this is just for demo purposes. Like I said, I wanted to prove out that the reed switch was sensitive enough to read those magnets going by it without triggering some you know, false chuffs or some other randomness. So we'll put up a little volume here and just roll it back and forth and demo it. And that's with those 4 magnets going by the reed switch. So for comparison, I'll do the 6131 here. So here's the 6131, and again, this has the kind of the classic magnet arrangement, and this would be a lot closer to the proper chuff rate. And lastly, this is what the 6184 should sound like. It should sound like getting pulled by the engine. As you can see, we're kind of triggering on the 45s here. But what it means is that the magnet's picking up correctly. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty confident I'll be able to use this in a locomotive someday. So what's left to do now is reassemble the tenders. I have to do a little bit of lighting connections on the 6184 to match what I did in the 6131. And then I'll get the tender shells put back together, and then we can move on to doing a few little cosmetic things on the locomotive here. Alright, so as you can see, I've got the tender wiring pretty much squared away, and I kind of realized on the 6131 tender back there that I actually hooked up the marker lights to work. And I normally don't do this, but I don't know, I guess I did. So, and I actually had to go and figure out how I did this. So, as you can see, they turn on and off. I'm using the aux 1, 8, and 9 feature keys on the cab 1 to turn them on and off. But they only work in reverse. And so I set them up using the reset code or the behavior code for the R2LC. I used code 6, which is like technically diesel with a cab light or whatever. And there's no penalty for using feature codes like that. From all I could tell over the years, these feature codes only really affected the output more than anything. And the feature code output controlled by aux 1, 8, and 9. And it also gave you directional lighting if you had a diesel or whatever. If you had a steam, you got directional lighting with the tender rear light, and the front light just stayed on all the time. But using the diesel code, I was actually able to take advantage of this behavior they had on the output. And I think this is for like when you use different color markers or class lights with the diesels. They're supposed to change color with direction, but I just set it up like this. So I think Penzi used these markers in more of like a yard or a facility setting where the engine might be backing through track work, where there's workers or other engines moving about, or standing still. I don't think they were used very often on the road, so this is the way I set them up. And anyway, we're about done here, and I'm going to put the tender back together. Alright, I got the rear glazing in. I like to use that Eileen's tacky glue. I think it works pretty good. And if you make a little mess up, it's pretty easy to clean up. Hopefully that stays in there. I also decided to just go ahead and print a new rotary magnet cam here. I just wanted to try out some clear PLA. And that other part, like I said, was really rough. So this one's not too bad looking. It's actually kind of cool looking with that clear PLA. I was planning on doing some experimentation with a clear PLA to make maybe like marker light lenses and things like that. Maybe headlight lenses. Let's see how well it prints. There's a little bit of experimentation I'm looking forward to getting into. So here's the tender shell getting ready to go back on, and should be pretty easy. Well, tender's all back together, and I know I've got some cosmetic work to do on that engine before I can get into weathering it, but with the tender all put together and operating, it's time for a test run. Alright, so the 6184 is sitting here on the layout, getting ready for its maiden voyage. I have yet to spin this around the layout once, so here we go. I'm going to give it some juice here, and then we're going to fire it up. I've got the Lionel 6100 S1 sounds in here, the S1 duplex, so pretty nice sound set. So I got to get over onto track 2 there and pull the train that's sitting behind it. So I got a good test for it right off the bat. We're going to try to get through my Atlas number 5s here. So let's... Thank you. Let's get it going. We'll get it moving at step 1 here. Nice smooth rollout. Nice gear ratio in this engine. I don't expect to have any major issues like that 5011 class was giving me. Even though this is a 10-coupled duplex with a long wheelbase, it's not quite as long as that 5011, and it doesn't have the springing problems it has, that the 5011 has, so I have real high confidence this is going to be a great running engine. Alright. Ready to cross over here from track 1 to track 2. Let me set switch 1 crossover to go over to track 2, and let's see how we do. This is why I add a third pickup roller to all my engines. I want positive electrical contact. So here we go. I mean, we're just cruising right through on speed step 1. No problems whatsoever. And I don't know if you noticed, I don't put a 9-volt battery in my tenders either, because with the third pickup roller and the positive electrical contact, I don't have to worry about the sounds dropping out. So yeah, that just breezed right through there. The tender roller didn't get twisted up or nothing, so my anti-rotate roller mount worked pretty good, I think. So, and this thing has such a nice gear ratio, it just cruises. So, I'm going to quit yakking here. We're going to couple up and go for a spin around the lap.